Thank you. It's great to be back in Manitoba, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed Matt's presentation. Really good food for thought for a lot of people involved in the game like you are, giving a lot of time, and I just think these are really important things that often, my job over 40 years has been often just to talk about hockey, and I think what you discussed this morning was really important, and I congratulate you for being here. I think this is wonderful stuff. It's going to allow you to do a better job of what you do, and in the end, it's going to help kids enjoy the game more, and that's what we're in it for, is to get more kids playing the game, keep them playing the game, and have more fun. And it's interesting because when you're in Sweden, they talk about, well, we talk about the hockey triangle, the pyramid. There's lots of kids at the base, and we know it goes like this. In Sweden, they're really stressing the rectangle. They want to get lots of kids started in the game, and they want to keep a lot of people in the game as long as they can. And there's lots of programs they have for older people, and I'll talk about some of those, that are designed to keep kids in the game longer, and that's important. I should apologize for my voice. It sounds like 20 miles of gravel road, and that's what it is. I have this coaching for so long and doing so much talking, I think I've done something to my vocal cords. I don't know what it is. When I come back to Manitoba, I think of a couple people. First of all, I think of Wayne Fleming, who, if you're not from Winnipeg, who this gentleman is a really good hockey coach that I had a chance to work with at the Olympics in 1992, and many times before that and after that as well. He died of brain cancer, gave a lot to our game, and really a terrific guy. Cal Botterill, who is a sports psychologist here in Winnipeg, just has done a lot of work to help a lot of coaches in the area of coaching, dealing with your stress, you know, how to be better at what you do, not the tactics of the game, but really talking more about, and I'm going to talk about this with you in a minute, self-management skills, because that's a big part of the game. I should also talk a little bit about Winnipeg. I used to live in River Heights. When I was a young guy, I lived here for 2.5 years in River Heights area, and I played for the River Heights Cardinals. And it's interesting because we won the Bantam Provincial Championship 2 years in a row. And I was listening to Matt talk, and we had a coach. And the coach, his name was Richard Rudd. And he told me way back then that I had maybe a gift to play the game, and I should keep at the game. And that personal moment that when he told me that, it's funny how it stuck with me for so long, and I often look back, and he was a guy that wasn't a real skilled hockey coach, but he was an unbelievable person with unbelievable skills to get you excited about playing, and that was really what he did for all of us. So I have great ties here with Winnipeg. I always like to start my presentations with a couple of stories, and here's one for you. When I finished with the Olympic team in 1992, I was then hired by the Calgary Flames to be their coach. And I can remember going into the office in June thinking I better start getting ready for training camp. So I went into the office, and I decided I should clean it up. So I was cleaning up the desk of the late Terry Crisp, who had been executed, and I was going to take over. And I went into the bottom drawer. The desk was completely empty. But the bottom right-hand drawer, there was an envelope, and it said, "For the next coach." And I thought, wow, boy, that's really nice of Terry Crisp. So curious guy, I could feel there was something inside the envelope. So I opened up the big brown envelope, and there was 3 envelopes inside. And I thought, boy, that's pretty interesting. And there was an envelope with a number 1 on it, and it said, "Advice when you're in your first major slump." And inside was opened up this little card that said, "Blame the schedule." I thought, boy, that's going to be brilliant. I'm going to use that for sure. But I couldn't stop there. I said, no, so the second envelope said, "Now you're in your second major slump, to be opened at that time for some advice." I opened it up and said, "Blame the injuries." Thought, boy, that's pretty good too. So I've got two really good help. Now there's the third little envelope. So I decided to open it up. You're in your third major slump. And you know what the card said? Prepare 3 envelopes. Coaching. That's really coaching. Okay? Here's another one I've always enjoyed. It's a story about coaching. And it talks a little bit about like where a lot of coaches come from. There was hunters that used to come up to Manitoba, Americans. And they rented a hunting dog. His name was Athlete. And he was an amazing hunting dog, this Athlete. He was great shape. He could run. He could get those birds, sniff them out, and scare them up. And hunters had great success. And when they came up the first year, it cost $500 to have him for the weekend. And the hunters thought it was very expensive. But Athlete was an amazing, amazing hunting dog. So they were really impressed, and they took him, and it was great success. The next year they came up, and it was $1,000 for the weekend. And they thought, boy, the price has really gone up for Athlete. The price has just gone sky high. But they decided the results were good the year before, and they rented the dog, and they had great success. Unbelievable. Well, this process went on year after year, and the price kept going up and up and up. Finally, one year they phoned and said to the owner, we want to rent Athlete again, and how much will it cost? And the farmer said, well, I got to tell you, I've changed his name now. We call him Coach. He just sits on his ass and barks. So that's what a lot of athletes do. They go into coaching, and they change a lot. So, and we tend to coach the way we were coached, and that's not always good. Hockey is a very difficult game. It's a hard sport to learn because you got to stand on skates. The ice surface, the coefficient of friction is very low. So you're on a slippery surface on a pair of these narrow little blades. It's not like you're able to run like you can when you play basketball, soccer, baseball, football. You got to wear skates, and that's really difficult. You have to handle the object, the puck, with this long implement. Not your hands. Your hands handle the implement, but not the puck. Some sports, baseball, football, basketball, you use your hands. So there's a lot of sports that are easier to play than hockey because our sport is very, very difficult. There's contact. Other people can hit you. There's 10 players, 5 on your team, 5 on their team, plus you've got the goalies to deal with. There's a lot going on a small surface, okay? And so the game is really challenging for children to learn. So you've got to always keep that in the back of your mind. It might look easy from the stands, and even from the coaching I found from behind the bench sometimes, the game, you can't figure out why the guy couldn't make that play. But when you're in the midst of the game, on the ice, with all this going around in front of you, it's a different perspective. So you've got to always appreciate that. One of the things that I think is really important in coaching and working with kids, managing kids, helping kids out, is your self-management skills. And I think with coaches, not enough work is done in this area. By self-management skills, I mean things like poise, patience, seeing a big picture, you controlling your emotions, not your emotions controlling you. And one thing I found really early in my coaching career, if my team wasn't playing well and we did lose, it damaged my ego. And then I was not very good with the players. It took me a long time to understand and to realize that that's not the way to handle people. If your team doesn't play well and your ego's on the line, you're going to be armed and dangerous with those kids too much of the time. So I had to figure out how I was going to cope with some of this stuff because I wasn't enjoying it. I don't think the kids were enjoying it very much. And I started out coaching Bantam hockey in Saskatoon. That's the first team I ever coached was the Bantam Blues. And I was teaching phys ed. I coached basketball, football, wrestling, plus I coached community hockey. So I had to learn some coping strategies. And so I actually worked at parking things. You know, the old expression, your parents tell you count to 10. If you're not sure, if you're going to feel yourself percolating, count to 10. Well, I started to work on those things. I also, on my game cards, would always have, David, your mother is watching. you know. And so as I would mark my notes, I'd say, oh, David, your mother is watching. So, you know, I had to find things that helped me cope with circumstances that change quickly and not always in your favor. So I tried to learn some preferred responses. I tried to rehearse, okay, the game's not going well. What can you do? You can react impulsively and emotionally, and it's probably going to be wrong. Or you can be a little more calculated and work on it beforehand and maybe be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I started to do those kind of things because I've learned in the game and working with people, no one is perfect. That's number one. No one is perfect. And number two, generally people mean well. Most of the time when you deal with people in any form, they mean well. They aren't out there trying to sabotage you. They mean well. And so that's the challenge. Anytime you're working with interpersonal skills with people, that's the biggest challenge I found in coaching. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of those things. I'm going to try to tell you what some other federations in other countries have done with their game. I realize you're administrators. Some of you have coached. Some of you are still coaching. I do know for sure a lot of you are hockey parents. And that's why, again, I thought Matt's presentation was just unbelievable stuff. I just love listening to that stuff. I've coached for a long time. The one thing I've always tried to do is, you know, keep learning, because that always kept me kind of motivated to do what I was doing. I always felt I could, if somebody else can do it that well, I could do it the same. If somebody's doing better than me, I want to do that. I want to catch up. So I always tried to do that. So I'm going to kick off here now. I had two sons play the game, youth hockey, minor hockey. One is now a stockbroker in Calgary. He still plays old-timers. He's not old, but he still plays old-timers hockey and loves it. And my other son played college hockey, major junior college hockey, played in the American Hockey League, then went to Europe and played there for about 13 years. And now he's the assistant coach with the Moose Jaw Warriors in the Western Hockey League. They just beat Brandon last night 5-0 in Brandon. Not bad. That's my kid. Anyway, so you're always proud of your kids. This is a guy who I never thought would go into coaching. Like, God. And I tell you one thing, being a coach and having a son play the game, that's not easy, I'll tell you. Because I learned very early, say nothing. Say absolutely nothing. Sneak into the rink and don't stand with the other parents. Get as far away as you can. Hide if you possibly can so that you don't have to listen to anybody. Watch the game and then don't give them any feedback because they don't want it from you. They really don't. And that was my son at least, and that's, I think, possibly the case with others. Okay, why do kids play the game? I'm going to try to get, here we go. Obviously, there's lots of reasons, and these are things you know. That's fun. That's number one. They have to enjoy what they're doing. They want to socialize with their friends. A lot of kids want to try it out just to see how it goes. They've seen the game. They think, maybe I should try that. So they try it out, and they kind of evaluate how it goes. They have hockey heroes. There's the Crosbys and the Gretzkys and all those guys. Gordie Howe when I was a kid. Hockey heroes that provide you with the thought that maybe it's something I should try and try to play. You have dreams. Maybe I can play at the top, you know. Trouble is, mom and dad sometimes have those dreams, and that's the real problem. And then the parents or siblings also generally influence children to play the game. So that's kind of why kids play the game. There's probably other reasons, but I think the number one thing is they want to enjoy it. They want to have a good experience. They want to have fun with their friends. And I don't think sometimes they even know the score in the game when they're real young. They just, enjoy playing and having fun with their, I'm getting this to work here. Okay, there we go. Try it again. Here we go. Why do kids quit playing hockey? And you know more than this than I probably do. Usually, somewhere on the line, they're not having fun. That's a negative experience. And it can be a multitude of things, not playing enough, all kinds of things. But coaches or parents often are the problem. It's their behavior is negative. And so the kid becomes caught in a situation where after a while he gets worn out. He's tired of people talking to him about how he's playing. He's tired of too much feedback, and that's a problem. Sometimes hockey takes too much time for some kids. They want to do other things too. And that's why we've come up with streams like the recreational stream, there's the competitive stream, and these are good things. These are the things we have to do. School sports become more important because you're amongst your peers, and there's also girls there if you're a guy and that type of thing. So obviously, you get a bit of a reputation of being a pretty good athlete if you're playing basketball or high school football, not community hockey. So oftentimes it's just the fact that the prestigious sports are within the school system, not outside. Is it too expensive? For some people, it is too expensive. I don't think that's a big problem. I heard some conversations about that, but it is expensive, and that does affect some families. Fear of injury, I think it's becoming a bit more of a factor. Football's going through a real thing right now where parents are concerned about all head contact and concussions. With hockey, I do agree with what Matt said. There's a lot of other sports that have higher incidence of concussion than ice hockey. But still there is fear of injuries, spinal injuries, things like that. And there's also the realization by the child that they're not good enough. And that is sometimes the way it is. We're not all going to be terrific hockey players. Some kids just realize at a certain age, this is not the game for me, and so they move along. So those are some things that happen. Now, the next thing I want to look at is how do parents contribute to the kids quitting? And maybe I've gone one step too far here. Hang on. How does the coach contribute to the kids quitting? Well, the coach, and you all know this, is the key ingredient to enjoyment and improvement. And that means retention. So if kids are improving and enjoying it, usually whatever activity they're in, they're going to stick in and go further with it and longer with it. So that's really, really one of the key elements. The coach may have poor self-management skills. I talked about those. He's a guy that's controlled by his emotions. He doesn't control his emotions. And so he's all over the map. The kids aren't sure. Sometimes he's happy, they're happy. He's not happy, they're frightened. So it can happen. So the coach has to have good self-management skills, and a lot of people don't. They have no training in that at all. And that's one of our issues we should probably talk about. The child might not get enough ice time to feel he's contributing. Like some kids, they don't play enough and they don't feel that they're contributing, they're part of the team, they're not going to stick with it. And of course, parents usually point out that they're not getting enough ice time, and that also adds to the problem. The coach may lack empathy. Children learn at different rates. If you're not a really highly educated person, you might not even, I think we all realize that, but sometimes you forget it. Like some kids can learn really quickly. There's some kids that are precocious. They're the outgoing, aggressive kid that looks really good really early in any tryout situation because they're just go-getters. They're full of energy. They're full of confidence. They don't know any better. And then there's the little guys and gals that are shy. They just want to, they're out there, but they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to get caught in the mainstream of the game. They're just happy to be there, socialize with their friends, but they don't have enough confidence to really participate in the game as much as you would like them to do. So that's a problem. Overcoaching can be a problem. Trying to get kids to do things that they can't do. They're not ready for those kind of things. So it's really important that you don't overcoach kids. Like kids, as I said, it's a difficult game. The art of skating is a difficult task to learn. It's only through hours and hours of skating that you actually learn to become a good skater. And so children have to have more than just their practices. They have to get out and skate on. The old days we used the outdoor rinks, and that's coming back now. More and more we're getting kids skating on outdoor rinks and things like that to improve their skating skills. So you got to be careful when you're coaching kids that you can ask kids to do things they're not capable of doing. And the problem with that is you get frustrated, and then they start to question themselves too. Am I good enough to play this game? So those are all skills that I wish our coaching curriculum, at times we talked about some of those issues. And then the one I think is really important is there's a real tendency in the game, any game, to label kids or label players to kind of justify or cover up their ability to They can't improve. So you think that the lack of improvement is a problem. The parents thinking, gee, my kid's not getting any better. And so as coaches, sometimes we label them. They're just not haven't got good game sense. They haven't got enough competitiveness. They aren't tough enough. That's one that always comes up too. Another label we can slap on kids. So often we'll slap a label on to camouflage the fact that we can't improve that player. And again, it's our ego. That's our problem as coaches. Our ego, we got to put a label on them to take us off the hook because we just can't seem to make them better. And one of the things I've really learned about coaching with children is it's amazing sometimes how you think you're making no progress. You have a whole year with a youngster and you think, geez, did we get anywhere with that young fella or young gal? But the next year at tryouts, it's amazing. That's when you sometimes see what was accomplished, because suddenly that youngster is more ready. They're a little bit stronger. They kind of know what they're doing. They can kind of navigate themselves through the sport, and suddenly their level of confidence to start out with is a little bit higher. And I think everything in life you do well is because you have confidence to do it. You have confidence to admit you can get better. You have confidence enough to seek help to get better. And it's the same with kids. I mean, if they're confident, they will try things. They will do things they would never try a previous year. So that's really an important thing. Now, so we've looked at how the coaches can contribute to kids quitting. How about the parents? And these are things that you know way better than I do, because you guys are dealing with these people all the time. And boy, am I glad I coached adult hockey, because I hadn't rarely had a problem to deal with a parent. The odd time. It's the agent that was the problem. They're actually the player's parent, is the agent. They're phoning you, why isn't my guy playing enough? Why isn't he playing on the power play? He's not playing with the right guys. Does this sound like a parent? Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? Okay, how do parents contribute to kids quitting? Well, parents should provide support, and they shouldn't coach or referee. And that's hard for parents, because when you go to a game, you essentially do become like a coach. You're kind of gauging your kid's ice time, who he's playing with, all those kind of things. Of course, the referee, you're always on his case. He's not trying to screw either team, but you think he is. He may be a little incompetent, but that's the way it is. I mean, they're volunteers, they're not professional referees, and even professional referees, as we know, make a lot of mistakes. So the parents often go to the rink with the wrong mindset. They got the wrong mindset to start with. They don't let their child learn from adversity on their own. I think sometimes kids can figure it out if you just don't give them too much feedback, give them a little bit of time, maybe give them a few hints, but not so much feedback, because kids can learn a lot if they can overcome a little bit of adversity. And you can often do it by not telling them what they should do, asking them questions. Do you think are you participating hard enough? Can you give a little bit more? What do you think? Things like that, so you're not critiquing them, you're kind of questioning them a little bit, because that's really important stuff for kids. If you don't let them learn through adversity, what happens is you take them off the hook. You point fingers at the referee, you point fingers at the coach, you point fingers at the kids they play with, they don't pass the puck, all that kind of stuff. So what you can create is a problem, which is called the victim mindset. The youngster thinks he's not being treated fairly, and you're reinforcing that, and so you get a real problem for the young player, a real problem. And it's difficult when you do that. You got to let them kind of work their way through some things. And as I said, ask questions, give them hints, but be careful giving them way too much feedback. A lot of kids will tell you the worst part of playing hockey is the ride home. It's the ride home with mom and dad, because now they're going to really lay it on the line to you about what you should have done. That guy didn't pass the puck to you. Why doesn't the coach play you on the power play? So they start to second guess a lot of people around. And as I said, that creates a victim mindset, and the player's kind of off the hook, and I don't think that's quite right. Plus, that's a nightmare for kids going home. Can you imagine going home after a game and win or lose, and your mom and dad are quizzing you and giving you feedback, you're going to get burned out pretty quick, and you're going to eventually consider doing something else because you're tired of mom and dad. And then obviously parents can exhibit poor self-management skills. Everybody here got great self-management skills? Do you all go to the rink and just absolutely emotionlessly watch the game? We don't. We all take part in refereeing, and we all take part in coaching. And so we got to educate. That's what we have to do. I think we got to try to educate people. That's why I think coaching conferences and coaching clinics, more and more content should be less and less on drills and tactics and all that kind of thing. Those are good things. But when you look at coaching, there's the art and science of coaching. Some people have both. The art being great interpersonal skills. The players love playing for them. They enjoy playing for them. They're learning from them. And then there's the science of the game. They understand the game. They can simplify what appears to be difficult. They can make it sound so simple. Those are amazing coaches that have the art and science. Some coaches have only the art. They're great people, don't know much about the game. They can get great results. They can get absolutely great results with children because the kids enjoy it, they respect them, and they love it. And the guy's a good guy, or the gal's a good person. And so the kids play. They play hard for those kind of people. So sometimes you have to look at the game and look at coaching, and the art and science of the whole thing I always find very, very interesting. Okay, let's look at for a second now at, if I can get this to change, try it again. Whoops. What do the best coaches do? This is always a good one. Well, I'll tell you what the best coaches do. It doesn't matter what any level it is. They have a good coaching staff. Like if I was coaching children, or when I did coach the Bantam Blues, I had two other fellows help me coach. They were both parents, much older. I was just a young guy. I had no children. My wife and I just got married. So we had no kids. I had no experience raising kids. They did. So you want to get complementary people around you because a coach cannot be all things to all people. So when you're coaching, whether it's children or adults, it's important to have a complementary group of people around you. People that can bring something you can't bring. I've always felt with children, and you want to see their skills improve, it's not bad to have one of the coaches that can actually skate and maybe demonstrate a little bit, you know? So when I was young, I could demonstrate. Now I'm way past my demonstration. I have to get other people to do the demonstration, but I do that when I do clinics and stuff. I have somebody come with me who can do all that stuff because that's past me. So it's really important that you develop a coaching staff that's complementary. You have more than one coach. They bring different things to the table, and they're people that you enjoy their company, and you know for sure you're going to be able to appeal to a wider range of audience because you've got different skills within your coaching staff. What do good coaches do? Well, now you got to temper this with children, and then it changes as you go up the ladder. Good coaches are hard to please, but easy to play for. They're hard to please, but easy to play for. Hard to please means that they're demanding. They want you to get better. They address the details that help you get better. But easy to play for means that they do it in the right way. They don't try to insult you, embarrass you. They do it in such a way that you feel good about them trying to help you, and you understand after a while that the guy knows what he's talking about. The person knows what they're talking about, the coach. So, you know, I think it's hard to please and easy to play for is really important. It's amazing as you go up the ladder. I've coached in the NHL for 14 years. That's really important when you get up with those adults. I mean, we're paying them 6 to 7. What's Laney getting? $6.75 million a year. And we have to coach him with carefully. We can't affect his confidence in any way. We shouldn't. But it's amazing in the pro game how much money we pay these guys and how so many of them are so fragile because they've been brought up most of their career as the top people, top players. They've always been treated a certain way, a little differently than the average player. So sometimes, the game does create some players that are difficult and challenging to work with. But one of the good things about top coaches is they have things in perspective. They have good self-management skills. They're able to park problems and not get their ego in the way, and that's really important. Another very important point is they always provide the why we're doing it, not just the how and what we're doing. And that's really important. If you provide, even with kids, why we're doing this, why this little thing might be important, you're helping them understand the game. And when you get understanding, you get better execution. If they're learning, they're also it helps keep their motivation to stay in the game. So always, good coaches tell their players why we're doing this, and then it's the how and the what. But why is always first. Good coaches have empathy and patience. And that's really important with kids because you know your kids. Some days they get up and they're at the top of their game. Some days they get up when they're having their Cheerios in the morning and they're not very on top of their game. It's just the way it is. They're kids. They're young people. We have to adapt to them more than they adapt to us. Understand what gets rewarded gets repeated. That's usually a very important lesson for young coaches is what gets rewarded gets repeated. And it applies all the way up through the game. Catch somebody doing something well, bring it to everybody's attention, and there's a good chance that that'll resonate with other people as well. So it's really important, really, really important to remember what gets rewarded gets repeated. Not always with kids. Not always does it happen right away. But if you keep doing it, eventually it'll resonate, it'll get home. You have to, as a coach, understand that risk is part of the learning process. And even with the adult levels of the game, you have to let people play with some risk. Now, with young players, you've got to teach them a little bit about where is risk more acceptable than not acceptable. And so those are things you can build in. But you, as a coach, have to understand a little guy's going to try to stick handle by somebody in the wrong area, in his own zone. It's going to happen, for sure. Is it a good thing? It's a good thing, because he's confident. He thinks maybe he can do it, or she. So you've got to let him try it. If it doesn't work out, yes, you might get scored on, whatever. How are you going to deal with that? That's the key. That moment right there is how do you deal with that? You can get angry, or you can be patient, think about it for a second, say, boy, there's a real good lesson for a lot of people here if I explain this the right way. And so that's the art of coaching we're talking about. Good coaches look beyond talent. They look for the intangibles. And, I've always thought that's so important in our game. Skill is a huge thing. Skill is very important. Talent's very, very important. But I've always felt that understanding and those intangibles, effort, enthusiasm, those kind of things go a long way to make a good player. So good coaches often look at the intangibles as much as they look at talent. Teams have to be good at things that happen a lot in a game. That's a very obvious statement. If you want your team, a coach wants his team to be a good team, and a successful team, winning games. If that's what it's about, you want to win. You got to be good at things that happen a lot in a game. What is that? That's the skills of the game. Passing, receiving, really important things because it's a collective game. So good coaches, that's what they spend a lot of time on those things. They invest a lot of time and a lot of effort to be good at those things. I think a lot of coaches go way too quickly into tactics. If your team can skate and pass and receive better than another team, I think you're going to have a successful year, a really successful year. Forechecking patterns, all the tactics of the game, I think those are sometimes emphasized far too young for kids. I think kids keep it to the skills, do those things better, things that reoccur in a game, do them better than other teams, and you will find your way to a lot of success. Build chemistry. A lot of people, that's really a magic word in sport is chemistry. And what is chemistry? Well, chemistry to me, it starts basically with accountability. If we have some accountability within our team for standards of effort, standards of concentration, that type of thing, I think that pretty soon you get a little bit of chemistry. So I always talk about with players, when a player makes a good play, he does something very important on the ice for us to help us out. You see it. All the players, the coaches, we see it. That's good. That's the first step. Second thing is appreciate it. Wow, that was a pretty important play that guy just made there. And then the last thing is acknowledge it. Because if you acknowledge it, there's a chance he might do it again. And so that seems to be the sequence. See it, appreciate it, acknowledge it. When that occurs from the coach and from player to player, that's when you start to build chemistry. And even with kids, you're trying to build the bond between teammates that if I go out and compete and play hard, that's the best way I can support my teammates. I'm not always going to execute as well as I'd like because the other team gets in the way. But if my effort, my enthusiasm is always there, that's the best way I can support my teammates. And that's how you build chemistry. And I talked about back in 1961, 62, 62, 63, when we won 2 Bantam championships in the province of Manitoba. And none of those players, only one went on to play the game at a fairly high level. None other, it was our chemistry. We had great chemistry. We played for each other. We really enjoyed each other's company. We loved to be in the dressing room together. We loved to be on the ice together. We had a great coach who understood us. And so it was a wonderful situation. So chemistry is important. It starts with accountability. With kids, that's maybe a concept that's, when do you build that in? I think even with kids, there's a little bit of that too, that accountability. And that's concentration, effort, competing, getting to practice on time, participating hard in practice, listening. All those things are really, really important things. Those are all the accountability things. We used to always hear an old expression for coaches that, I don't have to be liked, I only have to be respected. I think, why not both? Why can't you be liked by your players and why can't you be respected? And again, I've talked about some of those things in the art and science of coaching that I think apply to that. But that should be the goal of every coach, is to be liked and respected. You're liked because you're a nice person, you deal with them properly, you respect them. And then you're respected because they know you are putting a lot of time in, you do know a fair bit about the game, and you're trying to make them better. And that's, so they do respect you for that. Good coaches run good practices. And when you run a good practice, not only do the players get better, but the players learn the value of a good practice. They learn the value of working hard during practice. It pays off. So good coaches run good training sessions. The kids have fun. They get lots of reps. There's lots of enthusiasm by the coach. They enjoy it, and they soon learn there's value to practicing. Most teams don't practice well if they don't see a value in it. So that's one thing that good coaches do, is they really make sure that the kids, by going through a good practice, well organized, high energy, high work rate, rest ratio, they soon learn one thing: hey, I can get better when I practice, and that's a very important lesson to their development. A lot of coaches at a lot of levels start to put kids in roles, playing a role. He's a checker, whatever. I think to me, that's a more advanced concept. With young children playing the game, I think they should play all positions. You shouldn't just have a little youngster play the left defense all year. I think it's really, really important to play the kids, I guess, even in goal. I know teams have always rotated goalies with novice hockey, and I think that's a good idea. I think it's very important for kids to play different positions because you don't know. You're putting them in a role that's based upon your feeling about that player. And, sometimes you're just a volunteer coach. You don't know what this guy could possibly be if he played another position. So I think it's really, really important. Be careful putting players into roles. Try to make multi-functional players if you can. Complete players. Improve their skills in all areas. Play all positions. If you do that, I think that really pays off dividends for them. Okay? Now, here's a really common question I want to talk a little bit about. Game sense. Game sense seems to be a topic that is always contentious. Is it an innate ability, or can you teach game sense? It's like everybody has different levels of talent. Sometimes it's the amount of effort you put in, the amount of time you put in. But when I was in school, for example, I was not a great math student, probably because I didn't put enough time into it. I just said to myself, I'm not good at math, so I created an out for myself, okay? But really, if you think about those things, it's really important that you understand that there are levels of expertise, levels of achievement in everything. Some kids will be better skaters. They're just going to be better skaters. Their mechanics are natural when they're young. They get a head start. The guy who's an awkward type skater, it's harder for him to catch up in those skills. So, yes, some of game sense is innate, but they can get better. They can develop game sense. And sometimes it starts with just developing good habits to common recurring situations within a game. There are a lot of situations that happen every game for every player. So if you can create a little drill to work on that and develop the reaction that's a good one, so they get a good habit, you will find their level of execution will get better. So yes, you are improving their game sense. It's through habits, good habits, but it does start to spread into their game. But game sense is a very difficult thing to analyze. Don't confuse lack of confidence with lack of game sense. Okay? Lack of confidence with lack of game sense. Because I'll tell you, there are times when I have seen youngsters that you wonder if they have any game sense. It's not game sense, it's confidence. They don't have any confidence to make a play. They don't want the puck. When they get it, they want to get rid of it. And so your first thing you say, oh, that kid's not very smart. He made a bad play there, a bad play there, giveaway there. Sometimes it's just confidence. And so you have to work with those kids to build their confidence, and then you can see where their level of game sense is. Okay? It's just too easy to slap that label on and say, he's just not a smart player. That's too easy and out for us. I think that's very important. I'll tell you a story. I had a fella play hockey for me when I was coaching with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I won't tell you his name. And he came to camp as a free agent. And very quiet young fellow. And I knew his parents. They were from Calgary, and I used to live in Calgary, so I kind of knew a bit about his family background. And boy, he got on the ice in training camp, and he couldn't make a play. And we were all, me included, were saying, man, his game sense is not very good. So we let this player go. He went to the Washington Capitals and played 8 seasons there. Eight very good seasons. He started in the minor leagues, caught fire with his confidence, and they suddenly realized the player they had, and we didn't. So I've always been, I watch children play the game, and I see some kids, and the precocious kid gets the puck, and he just goes, and he's going to do some pretty amazing things. The little person that can't skate well, doesn't want the puck, is not sure of himself, they're going to make lots of mistakes. So again, it all starts with confidence, and that's what you have to do is, can you build their self-confidence and help them become more successful and enjoy the game more? The best way to learn the game is by playing the game. That's the best way to learn the game. When we were young, when I was just a young guy, we learned a lot of hockey just playing outdoors. We wouldn't get a lot of ice time in a week. Organized ice time with a coach, maybe 1 or 2 practices a week possibly, but we played every night on the outdoor rinks. And that's where we really developed our skills and our vision, our game sense, was just the fact we played so many hours outside, no referees, no coach. You could make all the mistakes you want. You could play with as much risk as you want. If you turned it over, nobody cared. Those were good things because the accountability wasn't too high in those situations for us. It was just have fun, enjoy what we were doing. So anytime you can play the game, it's a good opportunity to learn the game. And that's why I'm a big fan of the cross ice or small ice hockey. I know there's probably people in this room that think Hockey Canada's moved to go to smaller ice, cross ice games, small ice practices. Those things are wrong. But have you ever tracked the amount of possession in a game? 84% of the game takes place in the end zones, either end zone. 84% of our game takes place in both end zones. And what can you say about an end zone? It's a small area. It's a crowded, small area. That's where the game is played. Teams go through the middle zone now as fast as they can, as quickly as they can, because they want to get into the offensive zone. So 84% of our game is played in the end zones. That's small hockey. That's small ice games. So what we're doing, Hockey Canada is doing, is I think terrific stuff. I really think that's wonderful stuff. And I'm going to talk a bit about what the Finns did years and years ago, but it's really important stuff. There's lots of puck touches for the kid. There's lots of decisions to be made in the course of the time he's playing cross ice, and there's really no repercussions. If the coach is positive, the coach is active using cue words for the kids, get your head up, try to see the ice, talk if you're open, little cues like that, suddenly, and nothing's automatic and nothing happens in a hurry in the game of hockey. It takes time. But over time, course of a season, you will see that cross ice hockey, small ice practices do help the kids play the game with a better skill level, and they start to make better decisions. They start to see the ice. They start to be able to, and once you can see the ice, once your skill is good enough and you're comfortable because you've done a lot playing in small spaces, wow, suddenly you see some real development in young kids. So I'm a big fan of what Hockey Canada is doing in that area. I think coaches always have to be constructive and provide positive words with children when they're learning the game, and even with adults. Like, have you ever read anybody read the book by Bob Knight? Bobby Knight's the basketball coach who throws chairs and goes goofy and everything else. Well, he wrote a book about the positive aspects of being negative is what his book is all about. Because, you know, as much as we'd like to tell somebody you can be anything you want to be, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. Some of us cannot be astronauts. Okay? It's not going to happen. We can be good at some things that fit, and we want kids, everybody to have a potential, and we want people to have dreams, but sometimes when you see some of these people tell you these kind of things, you kind of go, I'm not sure I can really buy all that. So be positive, though, more than negative, because positive words go a long way, especially with kids. I think that that's what they want to hear from you, is when they do something well or right, catch that moment. Those are the moments you got to catch. Quit looking at the scoreboard as a coach. Look at the game. And so when that little guy comes in, you can say to her, that was a great play you just made right there. That was exactly the right play to make at that time. Because when that little kid hears that, they're thrilled. They're absolutely thrilled that you've given them feedback. You've paid attention to them because they care that you care. And when you give them some good feedback like that, they understand a key thing. That coach cares about me. That coach is trying to help me. And that's a good feeling to have. That's why kids can stay in the game. It's because those moments are really, really important. Okay, I want to look at now at what some other countries are doing. These are the number of registered players in some major countries. In Canada, we have approximately, these are all approximate, 650,000 registered players. The USA has 565,000. The Czechs have 121,000. And look at Russia, 112,000. All those people, and I'll talk about that with you. Finland, 76, and then 74, and then Sweden, 64,000 players, registered players. So those are the numbers of players they have registered in their programs. Here are some things that they're doing. Okay, and this is just food for thought. Your hockey administrators, maybe some of you are coaching, But you do have coaches, and you can help your coaches with food for thought. In Scandinavia, both Finland and Sweden, they have regional skill coaches that go around the country. They're paid by the federation. You can contact the federation, ask for this individual or individuals to come to your community, spend some time with your coaches on the ice and your kids, and they do that. So the federation has regional skilled coaches paid for. That's their job, and they're very skilled people. They probably played the game at a high level. They can demonstrate very, very well, and they come in and they can help a coach with his team. And they can help the coach learn some things. They have time for the coach, not just the players. In Sweden and Finland, they keep score but no standings. So they keep the score in the game, but there's no standings in children's leagues. We're talking now about 10, 11 below, okay? There's no individual stats. That's really important in Sweden. They don't want individual stats. They want the kids to understand it's a collective effort. It's a collective game. We play this together. And so there's no individual stats, and no one even emphasizes those things. With young players in those countries, it's equal ice time. So up to a certain level, it's about a minute and a half, boom, the whistle blows, and it's a change. And they change. Everybody changes. So they do some things like that to give equal ice time, because at the entry levels, they've got to get ice time to improve, okay? Later on, yes, you do start to earn your ice time by how you play, but to start with, that's not a problem. Equal ice time is a good idea. They keep the game affordable by having organized equipment recycling sales, where they have really worked hard, because in those countries the game is so expensive. So much of the equipment is made now by North American countries in China and Korea and Taiwan, et cetera, but it's expensive. And in Europe, the prices even goes up. Like a price of skates in Germany for a pair of good skates is out of the sight. It's out of sight. So they do a lot of things to recycle equipment on a very organized basis by the various hockey associations. In Sweden and Finland, Scandinavia, both countries are going through right now a high immigration rate. There's a lot of people coming over from countries with no hockey played ever in those countries. And so what they did, the Hockey Federation started a game, I called it floor hockey for you so you can understand what it is. They call it floor bandy. They play floor hockey with kind of a bandy, a curved stick, and a wiffle ball, and that's become unbelievably popular. And it's now a sport on its own, but it develops good skills with the hands. And the reason they did that, because there were so many kids from other countries coming in at 10 and 11 with no skate. They didn't know how to skate at all, but they were infatuated with ice hockey. So bandy, floor bandy, or floor hockey was the closest thing they could get. So they started to play that. And then the Federation realized, maybe we should have learn-to-skate programs for some of these kids that want to try it. And that's what's happened. And if you look at the NHL, there's 2 or 3 Swedish kids with very un-Swedish names. Okay? And their kids have come through this evolution. And they've come from other countries where they started to learn the game at 11 and 12, not 5 and 6. And it started with floor bandy. And one of the good things was, because their skills with the implement were so good, when they got on skates, at least they didn't have to worry about puck control, because their hands were already pretty good. So they could concentrate on skating. So the Swedes and the Finns do some very interesting things that I think are important. In Scandinavia, club teams and associations, they collaborate in development. So every Swedish and Finnish elite team in a community works with the association very closely in curriculum, providing guest coaches, coaches clinics, and financing. Like the club teams pay they pay a certain amount of money to the federations to help them support youth hockey. And it's the way it is, and it's always been done that way. And I think that's really a good idea. In Finland, they started a program about 25 years ago called the Young Lions Program. The Young Lions Program was all based upon cross-ice hockey and small area practices. And the Finns just felt they could develop better players with that method. They could teach kids to play faster in a small area. And if you look at the number of successful players that have come out of Finland over the last 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years, it's amazing. You've got one you just signed this morning with your Jets. That's an example of the Young Lions program. So that program started 20 to 25 years ago. It was not popular with people because they felt the game should be played on the full ice surface. But now with the results they're getting, with these regional coaches they're getting, the Finns and the Swedes are doing some amazing things with their youth hockey. Let's go to Russia. I was able to coach in Russia. Oh boy, that was an experience. Okay, I was the first Canadian, first North American ever to coach in Russia. That was me back in 2007. I coached in a place called Magnitogorsk. And you know who I had on my team? I had a young 18-year-old player. It's pretty good. His name is Malkin. So that's a pretty good start, you know. And I really enjoyed coaching in Russia because I was coaching elite players and they were terrific work ethic. But I got to watch the kids practice. And it was really interesting to watch what they did and why their players developed the way they develop. And so we do a lot of things the same, but there are differences. So here's some things that they do in Russia. First of all, there's no recreation hockey in Russia. There's no recreation hockey. There's a few recreation times in some of the arenas where kids can go out, but there's nobody going to be there with you. It's just free ice time. It's like it was in the old days for us, just playing shinny. So they have they don't waste. That's their term. They wouldn't want to waste any money in recreational hockey. They focus only on the elite. In the old days of Soviet hockey, they would get children and they would do a muscle biopsy and find out the fast twitch fiber compared to the slow twitch fiber. And if you had a lot of slow twitch fiber, you didn't play hockey. If you were a fast twitch fiber individual, they would encourage you for sports where that was appropriate. The slow twitch would go to sports that were appropriate. That's in the old days when they were really Soviets. Now they're Russians. It's a big difference, okay? So they don't waste, that's a bad word, they don't invest any money in recreational hockey at all. It's elite hockey. The professional teams, the KHL's got 25 teams, I think, in it, and every team finances the youth hockey in their communities. Okay? They provide the funding. They provide the coaches. They provide the ice time. It is their program. It's their feeder system. If they're going to have a good team, it's because, in the future, it's because their development system is so good. I also coached in a place called Yaroslavl. Yaroslavl is where the plane crash occurred. I coached there a year and a half after that plane crash. And in that plane crash, 39 people died, and about 16 or 17 young players from Yaroslavl passed in the plane crash. And now, within 5 or 6 years later, they're right back where they wanted to be at the top of the league because their development system with youth is so high, it's so good. So their teams invest a lot of money in the youth hockey program. They really stress multi-sport participation. The kids play a lot of hockey during the hockey season, and then in the off season, it's soccer. They have a game now, street hockey or bandy street hockey they play. They encourage them to be in tennis, basketball. So they do a lot of other sports in the summertime. It's not very much summer hockey in Russia. It's other sports. As I said to you, 84% of the game is played in the end zones, and the Russians realize that. So a lot of small ice drills, a lot of small ice games. Okay? The practice to game ratio would be, normally it's minimum got to be 3-1. 3 practices to every game. They try to hit 4-1. 4 practices to a game. And their practices, I'm going to talk about that, they're pretty darn good. They get lots of ice time, lots of ice training on the ice, but they always do gymnastics and explosive activities off the ice. And ages 9 to 13 is when you genetically your neuromuscular system is such that that's a window of opportunity to develop quickness and explosive power. If you miss that window, you're playing catch up. So if you have a young person here, in North America, and you don't train that system between 9 and 13, they won't be as explosive or as quick as they possibly could be, as their genetic potential could be. So in Russia, they recognize those things, and boom, in that age group 9 to 13, they do an awful lot of explosive power training, and that's why they have so many kids that are so quick and dynamic in their game. The coaches are very active on the ice, giving feedback, and they do it in two ways. Rarely will they pat a kid on the back. Usually it's a slap on the ass with a stick, because that's old Soviet hockey, and they still have that. But they do give them a lot of encouragement, I think more than I probably give them credit for. And a lot of the coaches are ex-players. I would say 99% of their coaches are ex-players. There's hardly anybody that's not an ex-player coaching. And that, by ex-player, I mean professional players. So they've got a lot of knowledge. They can demonstrate very well, and certainly they can get things done with their players. The federal and local governments, along with the club teams, they put a great deal of money now into new arenas. And so there's lots and lots and lots of new arenas going up in Russia. It's immense. And you know what's very interesting is, do you know what size ice they're building? North American ice surfaces. This year in the KHL, the Russian Super League, or top league, they mandated that by the conclusion of next season, everybody has to have their rink down to North American size. The IIHF has decided now that all future world championships after next season will be played on North American size ice surface. So it's really interesting to watch our games sometimes come close together, sometimes they're not, but they're watching us all the time, and they love our North American size ice because the game is, they think, much more exciting than it is. Obviously, more things go to the goal. Anytime more action goes to the goal, it's a better game to watch. What really impressed me a lot when I was in Russia was how much they used Hockey Canada material. If you went into the coaching coordinator's office, the shelves were full of North American, USA hockey, and Hockey Canada coaching material. Like, it isn't like the Russians think they invented the game. They don't. And we use this expression, I used to see it on t-shirts, our game. And I never liked that expression in Canada. It's our game. We play the game. We've had the game a long time. It's not our game. And the Russians, that's the way they approach it. It's not our game. So they'll develop real good ideas on their own, but they're not afraid to take good ideas from other people. If some other federation is doing it better, why? What are they doing? Let's take it to our game. Let's at least try it. They have a lot of foreign coaches working in development. I was so surprised there's so many Finns and Swedes coaching with youth coaching positions throughout Russia. I thought they'd all be Russians. They're taking experts from a lot of countries. Their off-ice training they thought was too old Soviet. You ever watch those old videos when Tarasov was coaching? And those Russian players, the things they used to do? Well, they thought it was too steeped in tradition. And so they brought an awful lot of American, U.S.-trained fitness coaches into the Russian club. I'm talking youth teams now, youth organizations to work with children. And there's probably got to be 12 or 13 or 14 USA fitness coaches now with Russian clubs working with kids on fitness. And we've always thought the Russians had, they've always been very fit. That goes back again to, well, remember the 1972 series? When they were so fit and we weren't? Our guys were smoking cigars, drinking beer at training camp, all a couple of kilos overweight. But in the end, we won. We found a way to win, but it certainly wasn't pretty, that's for sure. And it's interesting, too, goalkeeping. The Russians couldn't figure out why they weren't developing more goalies like Tretiak, because there was a big gap there where they had no goalies. So they brought over Finns and Swedes to teach goaltending, and Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky. All these guys now are people that have come through Scandinavian coaches coaching the goalies over there. So it's pretty amazing stuff. Here's what a typical Russian practice will look like. Am I on time here, guys? Am I still on time, or have I gone too far? I'm not bad, I guess. Here we go. A typical Russian practice. Okay, now I'm not saying that we have to do things the way the Russians do. This is only food for thought. So let's make that really clear again. This is just some things they do to give you some consideration, so when you're having a coaching clinic or whatever, you can talk a little bit about what they do. 80% of their ice time with young kids is on offensive skill and individual offensive tactics. They never start working on defensive hockey until much later. They want them to become really proficient and skilled players with the puck. And so that's their focus, is on offensive development when they're young. They rarely stand in lines very long. Like, they're constantly moving. When you watch a practice, and it's because of their format. I'll talk about that with you right here. But their format is very unusual. There was a guy way back in the 60s, his name was Anatoly Tarasov. And he developed a program that he called the conveyor belt system. So they take the ice, there's your ice, and they have a lane down here. Kids come back down through a lane here, continue up through a lane here, come back down to a lane there, and go to the back of the line again and start again. So it's a conveyor belt. And at every lane, there's a certain number of skills that are very interesting. Jumping with a puck over a rope, under a rope, stick handling through blocks, stick handling around pylons, a coach providing resistance and poke checks. So every lane has an activity or skills they have to perform. And they're age appropriate, which makes a lot of sense. They get an extremely high number of reps. And they might stay on this course for 20 minutes. And you must think to yourself, boy, 20 minutes, you get kind of boring. It's never boring. They absolutely love it because the activities and the skills are interesting. They are challenging. And they can, as it goes along, they can make it, they just adjust the pylons, it becomes a little tighter. Okay? So they have this conveyor belt system where they get so many reps that they're absolutely, and you know who used to do this in Canada? Howie Meeker. Howie Meeker saw the Russians do that, and his old famous hockey schools back in the 60s, him and Lloyd Percival, they used to use Tarasov's conveyor belt system because you get a high work-rest ratio, they get lots of skill development, and they're interesting and they have lots and lots of fun. They also use station work. They'll divide the ice into 4 stations, have a coach at each station. The kids spend 7 or 8 minutes at that station doing that activity. The whistle blows, they change stations. And that's really good for total skill development. They have a wide variety of skills and tasks. They're lots of fun. They stress pace, but they don't stress pace until they can do it properly. Like, it's amazing. They'll let the kids go through the conveyor belt for about 8 or 9 minutes until they see that, okay, they're starting to pick up some of the skills here. And then they'll call them together for a second to give them a little break and then stress, okay, now we want the pace to be higher. And so the coaches are very active. They'll move along with the conveyor belt, tapping the kids, making sure they're staying at a higher pace. So they do a really good job. They know what they're doing, and they're developing some really good players. A portion of every practice, they have the kids pair up and do the same activity. Because when you pair up, you automatically start to compete with the other kid, whether it be a puck control drill or a chasing drill, because anytime you decrease space because of one player being a checker or a chaser, you increase pace. And so they get quick, and they get challenged, and it keeps a lot of kids very active. They'll blow the whistle, the other player goes on offense, the other player becomes the chaser or the checker, and off it goes. One thing I found very interesting, and I put this in only because it shows their attention to detail. They, they often have 4 nets on the ice, okay? They'll have, with the conveyor belt, you have because they take shots within this whole thing. And for every goalie, they take they have a little thing they bring out, a little plastic thing and they paint their crease. So for every drill, the little goalie has got a crease to work with. Because the crease is part of goalies, it's one of their benchmarks as to where they are. They need the crease to do their job properly, to learn their skills properly. So they really pay a lot of attention to those little details that I think often make a difference. They have a great amount of skating work, and always with a puck. And maybe I should change slides here. Have I got more for you there? No, I don't. So they have lots of good skills. The coaches are very active using cue words, and they always stress deception, disguise, surprise. Like they want their kids to have to learn, and that's why the coaches get in the drill. Little guy will make a turn in that conveyor belt, and maybe the previous session or time he went, there was no coach there. Suddenly there's a coach there, and he'll attempt the poke check, and the little guy's got to react to it. So they're constantly doing those things to keep the kids alert, and the idea of disguise what you're doing, that idea of always being deceptive is really important. If they do any strength work on the ice or after practice, it's always body weight. It's never barbells, it's body weight. Okay, I'm going to summarize now with you here what I've talked about. First of all, how can an association help the coach? Well, number one, I would think would be continue with parent education. If you can help the parents, you help the kid. If you help the parents, you help the child. That is for sure. So parent education is really, really important. Provide a mechanism or a process so the coach can get some advice or help with problem parents. Because sometimes there are going to be problem parents. No matter what you do, you're not doing it right. So they need some help with the association's got to step in. You're asking this person to volunteer, you better help them, because there are some people that are unreasonable. And it makes sense. Anytime you're dealing with a parent's child, that's their most valuable resource. So they are very, very concerned that the child has a good experience. He doesn't lose confidence that he or she is getting something positive from the whole experience. When you have coaching clinics, it's nice to have tactics and skills development. Those are good things for coaches to learn, but they should also learn, how do children learn motor skills? What are some tips to help a coach figure out how to teach motor skills? Because it's not easy. As I said before, you wear skates. There should be education programs so coaches learn self-management techniques, how to handle stress, how to keep their ego out of the picture, things like that. Why do kids quit the game? Coaches should be aware of that, and I'm sure in many associations, you're doing that. Continue to do that. Paid rotational coaches. In Calgary, that's where Hockey Canada is centered. So Hockey Canada in Calgary has paid coaches that work with youth hockey in Calgary. Again, the associations just book them, and they go out and they actually help the coach run training sessions, sit down with the coach after and discuss what they can do better or differently. But that's only in one city. It's Calgary. It's because Hockey Canada is there. So if you have the finances to do that, paid rotational coaches with expertise can really help the equation quite a bit. I think when you evaluate coaches, you should evaluate not just on did they win, but you should evaluate on their retention of players. You never want a coach to be the player's last coach. You never want any of your coaches to be the last coach because something's gone wrong. It's going to happen in some cases because not all kids should go on in the game. I wish they all would, but there's so many other good sports right now. We're being competing now with other sports that are terrific and well organized, and so we're getting challenged now for kids, and we got to deal with that. Stress importance for coaches, parents, administrators to have an open mind. God, we're so closed as to like when a new development idea comes up, cross ice hockey, small ice hockey, my goodness. body contact issue was a big political football. Oh, you got to have body contact. I mean, there's who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. But open up. Open up a little bit and always be receptive to considering new ideas. Don't turn it down immediately. Give it some thought. Discuss it with people. Good things happen when you discuss things. It's interesting because progress in the game is slow. In 1874, the first jockstrap was introduced to the game. The first jockstrap was introduced to hockey in 1874. In 1974, helmets were made mandatory. It took us 100 years to figure out the brain was as important as other things. Okay? So the game, it's a slow process. You're in for a long battle, but keep going. And I'm going to stop now and open up for any questions you might have, if there are any questions. Peter? Yes, sir.
How many rinks is the number of kids do other countries have? Or like, do we have the most rinks?
Yeah, we do. Even with our total of 565,000 kids, we still, I think, probably would have more ice facilities per capita than almost any other country. But I'll tell you, it's really, really changing, particularly not so much in the Czech Republic and other countries, but in Russia, they are rapidly building so many ice surfaces. Now they build these great big competitive rinks with 2 or 3 other facilities attached to it. So in Russia now, with only 112,000 people, I think they may have a better per capita than we do with number of rinks now. Yes, sir. Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's good. And I'll tell you one thing. Matt Sims' presentation I just love that presentation. I think it's wonderful stuff. That's good food for thought for all of us. We want to make the game better. I've coached for a long time, and I still love the game. I still watch a lot of hockey. I take a lot of notes because I want to get better. I still think I got something to learn all the time. So that's important. We always approach our lives from that point of view. How can we get better? How can we do what we do and do it better? Have fun. Enjoy the year. Thank you.